This is great. Shawn Kitchen, you just asked me if we're gonna do grunting, right? That's what you asked me.
Oh yeah, man. I'm all psyched up and everything. I even got my Macho Man Randy Savage impression ready to go.
Dude, it's great. I asked the guest, "Are you ready to go?" They're like, "Yeah, I'm ready." Are we gonna do grunting and stuff? Oh, that's too classic. Well, you know what? Let's just do it. It's why wait? Ow! Oh man! Yeah. Holy cow! Shawn Kitchen is here, and you're here. Welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. My name's Chris Kerr, and I produce podcasts.
Do we need to start over? Did I just peak the meter on that one?
I hope so. We love that. So, welcome to the show. I produce podcasts Well, Shawn, hold on. I'm going to introduce you in a second. Every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We really talk shop with podcast producers, engineers, and other specialists. And I have a background in audio engineering in the music business. And I entered podcasting about 7 or 8 years ago, and I noticed a huge lack of audio skills in the podcasting world. So the purpose of the show is to teach everybody who wants to listen how to produce more professionally sounding podcast episodes. And so that's what we do. And I really believe that you can produce great sounding audio, even if you don't know much. Just listen to the show, pick up little tidbits here and there. And trust me, all these little things that you learn add up, and it really makes a difference. Of course, Barry is with me here. Barry, you're ready to go, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I know. And also Podcast Engineering School. Just check out the next semester. Go to the website and find out. But Podcast Engineering School, that's obviously my school. So check it out. So Shawn Kitchen is here. He's so ready to go. He's all over my intro.
I even brought my studio audience with me.
Oh, that's right. Shawn has a local group of people there cheering him on, probably handing him food and beverage. But you are the host of the Northwest Corner Podcast, and the website is northwestcornerpodcast.com. Spartanburg, South Carolina. You approached me because you heard my show, and you're the way you produce your show is different than most podcasts. So that's why I'm excited to talk to you about it. And you're formerly trained in radio and TV, and you currently do a live format because you want to, kind of do your show as if it's live. And so that means you don't have to do as much post-production, which is awesome. So I want to hear all about that. And your show caters to independent musicians. And why do I have your phone number here in my show notes? Should I read your phone number?
Oh, no, that's all right. It's 867-5309.
Nice. Oh, I haven't heard that in forever. Barry, you know that song, right?
Oh, forget it.
I know. That's what it is. So
I love that guy.
Yeah, Barry, what did you sorry, Shawn, is it okay if I ask Barry a question or two?
Oh yeah, go for it. I'm just going to kick back here. Call me when you're ready.
So Barry, get up to the mic. What is Shawn Kitchen going to need to have a really good appearance here on the Podcast Engineering Show?
You're going to need a couple of horses or a couple of mules.
Anything else?
Saws, hammers, nails.
Really? What is he going to build something? Does he need anything else?
Beans, coffee, and biscuit, and a little piece of fat back.
God, I'm starting to get worried. I thought he was going to tell me I'd need a shovel and lime and some rope.
Barry, I'm getting a little confused here. I just don't know what the saws and the hammers and nails are for. But Shawn,
yeah. I'm thinking, man, that took a left turn all of a sudden.
So Shawn, you know about the speed round. Let's do it. I want you to tell me and everybody else from when you're just about to start recording an episode until all the way through. Like, I want the microphones, where they're plugged in, and then where you're recording it, and then how you're turning it into an MP3 and where you're uploading it to.
All right.
Give us the quickie speed round.
All right. You know what you need for this segment? You need a countdown clock sound effect.
I've thought of that, but then I thought for those guests that just go on and on, that would be awkward, right?
So, all right. So I'll try to keep the spirit of the speed round in mind here. Depending on who we're recording, we have a couple different setups that we can use. One of them is we have a Behringer UMC404HD interface that we can run straight into my laptop with Audacity or some other DAW if we wanted to do that route. But as our show has evolved, we now use more of a kind of a live music friendly type of setup. We have a Behringer X2222USB mixer, analog mixing console, and we run all of our mics into that. We have a bevy of Behringer XM8500 microphones, which are the only mic on the market that's actually sold by the pound. So if you walk into Guitar Center and say, I need 30 pounds of microphone, they're going to say, oh, yes, you need a Behringer XM8500.
Yeah, slice thin, please.
But we run all, yeah, exactly. And we run all those into the mixer. And then we used to do the 2-channel USB outs from that mixer into a DAW. But it just got to be a little clunky and the table got kind of full. So now we take that 2-channel stereo output and go into originally our Tascam DR-40 field recorder, because the thing is as reliable as a stone hammer. It just doesn't fail. But in the time since we've started the show, we've also added the Zoom H6 field recorder. I don't know if you're familiar with that piece of kit or not,
yeah,
but that's one of my favorite little pieces of hardware. The Zoom H6, I think no podcaster should be without it. It's like having a portable studio right in your coat pocket. So we have the ability to record up to 10 separate tracks into a DAW. Plus, we also do a 2-channel stereo recording mix, and we also with the DR-40 field recorder, we have it set up to record a safety track at minus 10 dB from the original as well. So just in case if we have a huge problem with clipping or anything like that, we've got a backup track that we can go to. It takes a little bit more post-production because it is recorded at minus 10 dB, but it's better to have that safety net and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Exactly. So you record it.
And I forgot to add. We also have. I heard you talk about using. You had an app for iOS, and I forget what it's called. Soundcart, I think, was that the name of the app that you talked previously on one of your episodes about using an iOS app for playing back sound effects and stuff.
Oh, the Rogue Amoeba Farrago.
No, you were talking about an app. I can't remember which episode it was, but you were talking about actually using an iOS app like on an iPad.
Oh, yeah, that's how I play my Barry clips.
Yeah. What's that app called?
Soundbite.
Yeah, that's it.
But there's a bunch of them.
We use Soundpad. It's available on Android, and I've got that running on a Kindle Fire 8 HD tablet. And we've got that preloaded with, our generic goofy little sound effects. But then I also create subfolders where if we have musicians come in that are going to showcase some of their studio tracks, I can load the studio tracks onto the tablet in WAV format and play them back live during the interview. And the way that we've got our hardware set up right now, those record to a separate track from the conversation, so we can do post-production on the conversation but leave the studio music tracks alone, because those are the final product. You don't want to be doing a bunch of compression and stuff to a finished studio track.
Right, totally. So all right, so then you record everything, and what software are you using? What's your DAW?
Well, I've got 4 on the computer. We've used Audacity, Traction 6, Reaper, and Hindenburg. Primarily, we use Audacity just because we've been using it and I'm familiar with the workflow for it. And it does do a couple things particularly well. But I got turned on to to Hindenburg here, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And the more I play with it, the more I'm in love with it. It is an excellently designed piece of software, and we're just going to go ahead and bite the bullet. We've been doing short-term rentals. They have a 2-month, 3-month, and 4-month rental option on Hindenburg. And I think we're just going to bite the bullet and go ahead and purchase the full program, because it's a little pricey up front, but the more I use it, the more I'm convinced that is the software for 90% of podcasting.
Got it. Yeah. All right. So let's step back. I'm not totally clear on when you're going to do your show. Is it just you hosting, or do you have people in studio? What's the dynamic?
Oh, no. It's I'm the host and the engineer. Madam Producer is our producer, and she sits in on the shows with us. And then we have 2 production assistants, also Ashley Morgan Witt and Michelle Champion. And so the shows typically revolve around the 4 of us as kind of the core group. And then we have our special guests, whatever musicians or other guests are going to be on the show that day. So we kind of structure the podcast a little bit like a morning drive radio show. That's kind of the vibe that we're going for. And
nice.
So we've developed the whole show really with an eye toward not only getting it right on the hardware end, but getting it right on the live performance end. We tend to approach our recording sessions as a live performance. We try to do them kind of with the mindset that we have a studio audience right there we call it the House of Kitchen. We try to do it as though we had a studio audience right there watching us. And so it's time to get up and perform like a concert. You don't get a do-over. So we try to come into it ready to go, prepared, and hit it live, and like we're going to be broadcasting on terrestrial radio. So that has presented a number of unique challenges to our show as well.
Yeah, that's good. I like that approach. I mean, I record my show the same way. It's like once we start recording, we're live. Although obviously, if I need to stop for a second and make a note, I can just stop, type in a note, and then continue, and I can, remove that silence later. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's like a live performance, especially with 4 individuals and guests. It's like you have to be so prepared, because if you're not prepared, you'll be stepping on each other, and it can get, as it can get really nutty with people talking at the same time, and so you got to have one well, are you the guy? You're the general. You're leading the field.
I'm kind of the ringleader. I'm running the board, and I'm the host of the show formally. And so our dynamic has kind of evolved to where each of the 4 of us has their own unique niche in the show. And we've been doing this now for about 1 year and 2/3. We're getting ready to release our, I want to say, 149th episode in just a couple of days. We release twice a week. So, it's actually a pretty rigorous schedule, considering that we all have day jobs, and some of us 2 day jobs. So it's just kind of evolved that way. When we started this 1.5 years ago, this wasn't our original focus. We started off as kind of a long format interview, so it was much simpler equipment. Our very first recording sessions were just our UMC404HD interface directly. We took the XLR outputs directly into a Tascam DR-40, and that was it. That was all that we did. We didn't have any production elements during the show or anything like that. And then I did everything in post-production in a DAW. But as we started gaining interest, more and more musicians took an interest in the show. So that kind of pushed us into a direction of being more like a live radio program.
Right. So did you tell me what microphones you guys are using?
Yeah, believe it or not, take a quick look here. They are Behringer XM8500s.
Oh, okay. You did mention those. Okay, so you're all using those. All right.
Yeah, believe it or not, it started off as, believe me, I would like a studio full of RE20s, but I can't afford them. That would be about $3,200 worth of microphones for us with
Right.
the level of show that we have right now.
Right.
It started off with these 1800s just because at the time that was what we could afford. But then, as the show grew and we decided to add on some additional hardware, we decided to add on stuff that would expand our capabilities, gear that we didn't have, and stick with the 1800s because I have, at least for the time being, I have kind of a philosophy that, especially when you're starting out doing a podcast or any kind of recording, really, or this can apply to so many different kinds of hobbies. When you're early on in your career doing this, the limiting factor is not your gear, it's you. You are the weak link. It's your production skills that need to come up to par. It's your presentation skills that are lacking, and you can take a bevy of Neumann mics and set them in front of a bunch of amateurs, and it's still going to sound like a bunch of amateurs. Whereas you can take a bunch of Shure SM58s and put them in front of a bunch of professionals, and they're going to sound like a completely different kind of show.
Right.
So that's we try not to get too wrapped up in feature creep, if you know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
We try
totally.
not to throw money at solutions. We try to approach it from more of a standpoint of improving us before we start throwing lots of money at gear.
Yeah. So, all right, with all those people in the same room, so you're basically the main host, but you have three other hosts there. Now, how do you minimize the bleed between microphones?
Well, my experience has been that because of the way that our room is set up and the design of the table that we use and the acoustics of the room itself, the more people we put in the room, oddly enough, the less of a problem that seems to be. I've heard that bleed issue more if it's just two or three of us, but if we've got a room full of people, I think having all the bodies in there and where we have all the mics set up, and again, that's part of it is placement. Where we're putting everybody in the room to minimize that bleed and crosstalk. That goes a long way into solving your problems. Is just learning where the pickup patterns of the mics are and just making sure that you place everybody around the room in positions to help minimize that. Again, going back to that thing about we try to look for solutions in us and increase our craft rather than looking for technological solutions to cover up the fact that we were doing something wrong at the very beginning. You know what I mean?
Right. So how are the four of you situated in the room, and where are the guests in comparison with that?
Well, we have, and it's kind of hard to describe on an auditory medium, but we have a very long table that everybody's kind of facing off to each other, almost like a battlefield. And with the amount of separation that we're able to put in between our guests, and then having everybody face off basically in the dead zone of the other person's microphones. That goes a long way towards helping us minimize any issues. And plus the nature of our show, with it being such an active morning drive show kind of a format, there's always sound being generated from somewhere. And so that helps to kind of mask any residual issues that we have leftovers because there's so much going on to begin with.
So are the four of you, the four hosts, on the one side of the table, and then on the other side are the guests, or is it two facing two?
Oh, it's just I'm the only guy who has an assigned seat because I sit where the mixer is. Everybody else, we just kind of, wherever they feel like sitting that day. So Madam Producer tends to sit across the table from me on the far end of the table because Madam Producer is my wife and I like looking at her. So I set her at the far end of the table. It gives me something nice to look at. And then everybody else is just, catch where catch can.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you have to send me a picture if you can. If you have any pics of the studio, send them.
Yeah, I had to go dig some up. So yeah, I got a couple I'll be sending to you.
Yeah, and we'll put them in the show notes so everyone can see. All right, so you're doing it as if it's live, and you're running through the mixer. You mentioned a few different mixers, but you're running through the mixers, and then you're recording. Where are you recording it again?
We're taking our stereo out, our main outs, the XLR outs from our X2222 USB mixer. That's our primary mixer. Our other one is just a 4-channel interface. We take the stereo outs from that and go into either our Tascam DR-40 field recorder or our Zoom H6, depending on application.
So then you got to be careful when you're recording that everyone's level is at a good level, right? Because you're mixing it all together, right?
Yep, that's part of the skill. Again, going back to my original background is in radio and television production. Many, many, many years ago, an entire lifetime ago, I studied broadcasting. And I worked in radio and network television for a period of time and even did some overseas documentary work. So I did some field recording and some field video as well. And that was the way that I was trained back in the day. This was prior to digital anything. I'll just say it. I went to college in 1990. I'm 46 years old.
Oh, same as me.
Yeah. So when I started my formal training in broadcasting, we were still doing everything on magnetic tape. We were doing everything on reel-to-reel machines where when you were putting together an audio bit for the radio station, you were up there holding on to the reels, winding them back and forth by hand and finding the spot right on the playback head and marking it with a grease pencil and getting out a razor blade and a cutting block, and cutting magnetic tape and splicing stuff together. So, way back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, that's how we did production. And so what that taught me in my youth was you've got to get it right up front, because we didn't have the digital technology that allowed you to make infinite copies of something and retain clear fidelity. If you made a recording of a recording of a recording, you get into the 3rd and 4th generation of recordings and the quality just went right out the window. So it was always stressed to us, your source material has to be right the first time. And that's still the philosophy, the ethos that we try to bring to Northwest Corner, which means that a lot of the responsibility for getting the sound right the first time falls on me in a live environment. So I have to approach recording our show like I'm the mix engineer at a large concert. And I have to be listening to things actively in my headphones while we're recording and be riding those faders religiously. You can help yourself with some of that stuff by using some of the built-in tools, like the 2222 mixer that we have has one knob compression on each mic channel. And it's not the best thing in the world. It's a one knob anything generally isn't going to get you the optimized result, as it would if you had an outboard compressor limiter that had adjustable ratios and threshold and release and all that stuff. But it does help. If you've got it set up properly, we've got our compressors set to where they're not catching just the transients of when you're recording. They're not just catching when someone's yelling at you. We've got them set so that even during normal speech, you're starting to see them triggered just a little bit. So we're riding into the compression just a little bit in normal speech. So it's already kind of active and adding in that compressive dynamic. And Behringer's one knob compression also has some makeup gain built into it. And so we're kind of riding into the compressor just a little bit during normal speech, which helps to catch those transients a little bit faster and helps us to keep control of things. And then we have all those assigned to different subgroups. So, I'm watching the subgroups as well while we're recording. So, we're finding more analog solutions to our problems at the beginning of the recording session rather than digital solutions at the end of the session. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's and like you said, that's a lot of pressure on you doing this live, trying to catch things, and if you're riding faders and stuff. So when you're adjusting volumes live, you're basically, and I'm kind of asking this for the listeners, not for myself, because I think I know the answer, but when you're riding faders, you're literally riding the faders. You're not actually adjusting the mic preamps, right?
Oh, no. You need to have that set up before you even start recording. That's part of our sound check process. Those input gains, there's an optimal setting for those. You really want the gains as hot as you can get them without overdriving the channel, because that's going to give you the optimum signal to noise ratio right at the beginning when you've got your inputs coming into the mixer. You need that maximized so that you're not introducing gain. You're not introducing static into the gain staging as you're summing up everything into your subgroups and then to your final out. You need that signal to have the best signal to noise ratio possible right at the very beginning.
Yeah, and Ralph M. Rivera just had to drink because you said the term gain staging, by the way. So, yeah.
I didn't know there was a drinking game involved.
Well,
here.
for Ralph, there is. He just loves that term gain staging. I totally agree with you. And the one thing that you've probably had to do in the past a few times is because if you're having musicians and if everyone in your studio has good mic technique and you do sound check everyone, then you can set your preamps in the sound check and never touch them again. But one thing I've noticed when you do anything live, like there's always somebody who, it happens in podcasting all the time. You ask someone to do a sound check and they get right on the mic and they're talking and they're like, okay, is this good? This sounds good. And you're like, yeah. And then you start the episode and then they move back 2.5 feet and they just start talking like this. And the level completely changes.
That. Well, they either do that or once you get into it and everybody's having a good time, their energy level goes up about 10%. And before you know it, they're shouting into the mics and everything's going to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah. So at those times, if it's way low or way high, then you might tweak a preamp, depending. But having the compressors is really good. That helps.
But that's where there have been times in the past where I've had a guest that suddenly is like 20% more themselves as soon as we hit record. On a lot of analog mixers, there's a pre-fade listen switch on there that if you is pre-fade listen or pre-fade level, it's a PFL switch. And if you click on that switch, click on that switch and watch your meters, that will show you the input level for that channel in real time without affecting your mix at all. It's not going to mute all the other channels or anything like that. So sometimes that can be a very important tool. We've had to use that. Well, I've had to use that a couple times when I can hear that something's starting to clip and I got to figure out quickly who it is. I'll just quickly start tapping PFLs and just watch that meter and see which one's, really in the red all of a sudden. That's the one that just went crazy on me.
So here's my question though. You're having between 5 and 8 microphones open in the room? at any
We've
time?
had as many as 9 channels going simultaneously.
Right. So here's the thing. Let's just say 6. Let's call it 6. That might be average. I don't know.
Okay.
If you have 6 open mics in a room and you have compressors on every mic, and if you have anybody who doesn't have great mic technique, there should be a bunch of room noise in the mics. Or are you using gates as well?
No, we don't have any gates, but again, it would make more sense if we had an image here in front of us. We're doing this in our living room, believe it or not. We don't have a dedicated studio, although that is in the plans for the future. The way where we place the table in the room and having everybody sitting where they are, believe it or not, really does. Bodies tend to soak up a lot of energy. So our personal experience has been the more people we have, oddly enough, the less problems we have. So yeah, if you really dissected it, I'm not saying that the magic cure for room noise is to put more people in it. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that because of the nature of our show, we've had to make some trade-offs in this area over here to gain the ability to do this thing over here. And we're balancing the, how do I put it? The pristine audio of, if you listen to some of the great narrative and documentary podcasts like 99% Invisible, Criminal, Radio Lab, This American Life, those are narrative documentary style podcasts where a huge amount of time is spent in post-production. And in a lot of cases, they're recording their vocals in specially prepared VO booths, treated rooms with, Auralex foam plastered all over everything. And you can get super pristine audio doing that. The downside is it takes a lot more time in post-production because you're kind of building everything like a Lego block castle. You're doing it a piece at a time. And we're going to expand into something like that. We're working on a second podcast idea right now, but that's another topic. The nature of our show, with it being more of a live radio morning drive format, we've had to sacrifice a little bit of that ability to get that extra 10/10 perfect audio quality. We've had to sacrifice a little bit of that, but in exchange, what we get for it is the energy of a live performance. It's kind of like the difference between listening to, Led Zeppelin 2 on your home hi-fi system and then going and seeing Led Zeppelin in concert. It's
Right.
Two different disciplines, and it's not that one is better than the other. It's two different disciplines. And
Totally.
so, that's where our show is a little bit different than a lot of the other shows that I've listened to.
Right. So your co-hosts, do they have good mic technique? They stay right on the mics and all that?
They do now.
They do now? Or else you whip them?
Yeah. Well, we've been doing it long enough now that really they learn by watching me. Now, what our listeners can't see right now, because this is a podcast, not a video cast, is that I don't have the microphone pointed. I don't have it directly in front of my face. The phrase that I heard a long time ago that's always stuck with me is aim the mic at your mouth. Don't aim your mouth at the mic. Because if you're facing dead on straight into the diaphragm of the microphone, you're really increasing your risk for plosives and other auditory problems. And so one of the keys to good mic technique is to offset that mic to the side just a little bit, still have it pointed at your mouth, because after all, that's where the sound's coming from. But you want that air that's coming out of your mouth on every time you pronounce a P or a B. You want that air to go across and past the diaphragm of the mic, not directly into it. And so my co-hosts, man and producer Ashley and Michelle, basically just learned from watching me, a better mic technique. And they've just learned now, because we've done it 149 times, that they need to stay into the mic. They've just learned from doing. And that's really the only way to learn, as far as I'm concerned, is you learn by doing. You learn by being willing to make mistakes publicly and still put it out there. You can't be fearful. You've got to be willing to suck from time to time. And that's how you learn.
Right. So just so the listeners know, I talk directly into my RE20 from close range.
But your RE20 is a little bit of a different beast, because it does have a built-in pop filter into it. And that your microphone was designed specifically for, radio type production.
Right.
And so a lot of the windscreens, the pop filters, the plosive filters that a lot of people add on to their hardware, a lot of that technology and that ethos is designed into your RE20. That's what makes it pretty much the gold standard of broadcasting.
Right. Yeah. So I also have an extra windscreen in front of my RE20, and which, by the way, stops a lot of the plosives, not 100%. Well, meaning it cuts down about 90% of all plosives, let's say it like that. And then in post-production, I can use my RX7, the D plosive, and it just kind of gets rid of all the rest of the plosives and makes it nice.
Well, and, going back to that whole, remember, I learned broadcasting when dinosaurs were still roaming the earth. We were taught that a good voiceover guy will tell you that you can train yourself how to speak in such a way that minimize plosives just as a function of the way that you speak. Just because you're saying a word with the letter P in it doesn't mean that you have to go puh, 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 every time you say it. You can look right into a microphone like I'm going to do now, and I'm not real good at this, but I'm going to see if I can illustrate it. You can aim squarely into the microphone and say, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, a peck of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked.
Yeah.
And not introduce a bunch of plosives directly into the microphone, but it's a vocal skill that you have to develop. It's something that you learn, just like singing and other pursuits. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about, we look not only at technological solutions to our problems, but we also look at human solutions to our problems. What do we, the people on the show, need to improve in the way that we're presenting the show? And rather than relying on post-production to fix all of our ills, we've got to get it 80% right out of the gate. Our end goal, we also own an online radio station, and we play unsigned independent musicians through that, but we have the ability to interject a live feed into that. So one of our future goals for the show is to get us to the point where we can actually do a live radio show in real time. But that means we've got to get really good at producing a live radio show, because when you're live, that's it. When the clock's running, you're on the clock, baby. It's time to put up or shut up.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, a long time ago started an internet radio station and did some of that. I was live broadcasting specific podcast shows at certain times. And well, if you're going to do that, all I can tell you is, hopefully you have a big audience and the people will tune in, and hopefully you can market your show well, because what I found is that live, not a lot of people showed up live to the shows I was doing. So and obviously I know that, but live is great, especially live streaming on video. What'd you say?
I said, it is a challenge. That's for sure. One of the hardest parts of doing a podcast, I know this isn't really the focus of your show, but man, marketing. holy cow, marketing a podcast that's a whole discipline unto itself.
Yeah. That's the problem. Or that's always where marketing is what makes or breaks any business, sort of. All right. Anyway.
Yeah, and that's not where my training is. So let's not go down that rabbit hole.
I can't stand marketing.
Or Barry's going to get bored and go to sleep.
I can't stand marketing because it's like, it's not my expertise either, but it's so important that it just like, that's one of the things in my life that kills me. Like I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, I got to do something. What do I do? It's like torture. Hand me a piece of garbage audio file. I'll take care of it. No problem. But tell me to go do some marketing campaigns. Yeah, go put a Facebook marketing campaign. Oh my God.
Well, the reason I hate doing marketing is because I don't have that thing in me that wants to shout, "Hey, everybody, look at me!" And yet I'm the host of a podcast. So
right. So
I guess that makes me a walking contradiction.
So you mentioned on your mixer that you're using subgroups. So who do you have grouped together?
Right now I'm using that 2222 mixer that we have has subgroup outputs on the back. They're 1/4-inch TRS connections on the back. And the way I've got it set up right now is we do all of the voices to one subgroup. And then the pre-recorded bits, our sound effects off the Soundpad or the pre-recorded, the studio tracks from the musicians, those go to a different subgroup because then we can run those two outputs, those two sub-outs directly into our H6 and record those as two separate tracks, vocals only on one and all other sounds on the other. Because when you do the post-production work and you're editing in the compression or limiting or de-essing or, whatever your workflow is, we want to apply that just to the people, not to the pre-recorded studio tracks.
Right. Because
we made that mistake early on in our show's history. We used to bake everything into one 2-channel stereo track
mix. Yep.
But then if we had sessions where the mic levels were particularly low, by the time you would add in the compression and the makeup gain to cover the vocals, all of the music stuff that we played in there was so squashed beyond recognition that it just sounded terrible.
Yep.
All the high end on the cymbals would get all kind of grainy, sounded like somebody applied a comb filter to the cymbals, and all the dynamics would go away and all that stuff. And it took us a little bit to realize that we need to keep the vocals separate from the music for post-production. Right. And leave the music completely untouched. So that just gets now shuffled off to a separate track on the H6 that we can process independently.
Right.
And then we've still got a 2-channel stereo backup just in case something goes wrong in the DAW.
Right.
Or whatever. We've still got a fallback. We can still release a 2-channel stereo mix. It's not going to be as good a quality as we could have done doing them separately, but it's a backup.
Right. That's good. Yeah. And so, okay, so you have all the voices grouped to one group and you're recording that mono, but the music is on another group. Are you recording the music into mono?
No, everything's recorded in stereo. The subgroup outs on the 2222 those are TRS plugs, and we can put a stereo Y cable in there. And actually, I didn't want to confuse things, but we go 2 channels of music into the H6 and 1 channel of vocal. So we're actually using 3 channels to get it done. All the voices are in mono. The music's in stereo on 2 tracks, but I just didn't want to confuse anybody.
Oh no, this is a show where we go that deep, brother. There's no depth we won't go on this show. Yeah, that's good. Because I was gonna obviously recording the music in mono is not the best, but so you're not, so that's good. Okay, so then you record it onto the H6, so you got 3 tracks then, stereo track of music and 1 vocal. So Then you bring that into the computer, and you said mainly you've been using Audacity, but now you're starting to use Hindenburg a little bit. So when you bring the tracks into your DAW, what do you do? Just adjust the level slightly and then just create the MP3 right from there?
Well, the first thing that I look at, and for people who are just getting new into the podcast scene, this might be a little bit confusing, but the veterans might understand it a little better.
You don't have to worry about confusing anyone on the show. Hold on a second. You don't have to worry about confusing anyone on the show. Trust me, anyone who listens to the show really wants to know the hardcore aspects of audio production. This is not a dumbed down show.
I confuse myself half the time, man. Sometimes I have to go back and say, what did I just say? I just confused myself.
Yeah, because I just realized that normally I tell guests, like, we're not dumbing anything down, so there's no need to dumb it down or even apologize for getting confusing. Just go, man. Let's do it.
When we import everything into the DAW, you get to a point after a while where you can kind of look at that waveform and get kind of a quick idea in your mind of where your trouble areas are going to be. So one of the first things I'm looking for is, do I need to apply any kind of limiter to this signal? Because like, for example, in Audacity, if you're going to use the stock compression plugin that comes with Audacity, and you've got a lot of transient peaks, real short but high intensity peaks in your audio file, the stock compressor on Audacity is going to look at that, and it's going to consider that as your top level, and it's going to use that as the basis for all of its calculations for doing compression. So what you're going to end up with is something that isn't going to be able to do as much as it otherwise could if you had more uniform audio at the beginning of the process. So one of the first things that I'm looking for is, do I need to apply a little bit of a limiter here? And I might knock it back to about -6, -7 dB, and I'll put a soft limiter on it, not a real hard one. If your limiter is too hard, it sounds like digital clipping to my ears. It just doesn't sound very good. So sometimes I might put a limiter about -6, -7 dB, knock everything back just a hair, and then I don't use the stock plugin. I use the Chris's Compression Dynamics plugin for Audacity. And the big difference in that is I like the way that it does makeup gain, essentially, at the end of it. You can set the maximum amplitude level at the end of the compression process. So it's kind of like saving you the additional step of having to go back in and re-amplify the track afterwards. So I run that Chris's Compression Dynamic plugin. Now, one thing I do differently than some of the other guests that I've heard on your show, I wait until the very end to do noise reduction. And the way that we do our shows, at the very beginning, I tell all of our guests in the studio, all right, guys, I need 5 seconds of silence with all mics open. And everybody will just sit there, dead silent, everything wide open. And that establishes the noise floor for the room, any ambient noise in the room. So then I go do our limiting, our compression dynamics, any amplification, normalization, whatever we need to do. And then I go back to the beginning of that track. And this one thing that Audacity, I think, does do very well is noise reduction, because you can go right back to the beginning of that track and highlight that 5 seconds of silence right at the beginning, open up the noise reduction, and tell it that 5 second section is the noise profile, and then highlight the entire track and apply the noise reduction at that point. But you got to get, about 5 seconds of silence with everything open at the beginning. That's where you don't necessarily want noise gates right at the beginning, because if you had 5 seconds of silence with all mics open and every mic in the room has a noise gate on it, all you're going to get is just the internal electric noise of your signal chain. You're not going to get the acoustics of the room. But by waiting until the end of the process, we have amplified slightly the noise floor of the room to a point where it's more easily discerned by the software. And you tell it, okay, now this section here that's slightly more noisy than it was at the beginning, this is the noise floor. And we found that about minus 14, minus 15 dB is enough to knock that noise floor back down to pretty much imperceptible levels during the course of the show. And Audacity does do a pretty decent job with the stock noise reduction on cleaning everything up. But that's through trial and error. We found that we got better results waiting until the end of the process to do noise reduction. I know a lot of people do it at the beginning.
Right. Yeah, that's good. But and you actually remove 14 or 15 dB of that noise?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, but remember, because we're getting that 5 seconds of silence right at the beginning, that's what we're taking out. So it will knock the overall volume of the track down just a hair. And so you might have to apply a little bit of amplification right after you do the noise reduction. But try it sometime. It actually does do a pretty good job of it. And that's the one thing that I think Audacity actually does pretty well. I like the way that they do it. That's one area where I prefer Audacity over Hindenburg. The way Hindenburg does it is a different methodology, and I'm not as big a fan of it.
Right. Yeah, I've used so many different noise reductions, and the one that I use now is in RX7, which is you can actually just scan the entire recording, and it knows what a voice is, what the noise is, and it maps the whole, comes up with a profile. Very similar to that. But yeah, removing that much in RX7, when I remove noise, I probably, if I have to remove like, I'd say 6 or 7 or 6 to 8 dB is normal. If it's a lot, maybe 9 or 10. But once I get to 9 or 10, it starts to degrade the actual voices, right? Because it's not a perfect thing. So it kind of like the voices themselves start to get a little messed up. So it becomes a balance of, well, how much noise do you want to remove versus how much do you want to destroy the voices? So you got to find that little balance. So, but hey, if you can remove that much and it still sounds good, that's awesome.
Well, I think the key to it, like I said, is getting that 5 seconds of silence with all mics open at the very beginning, and then using that as your noise sample. You tell Audacity, when you open up the noise reduction section of Audacity, right at the very top, there's a button that says Get Noise Profile. And you need to highlight that section of silence with all the mics open and tell it, Get Noise Profile here. And so that all it's hearing is the ambient noise of the room. And then you can highlight the entire track. And essentially, now I'm not a software engineer, but essentially what it's doing is it's getting kind of a digital snapshot of that room noise, and then it's applying the inverse of that wave to the rest of the file. And so
pretty much,
that's how, essentially, that's how it's taken the noise out. So if you get a good section of just the ambient room noise with no other sounds, that's all it's going to take out, because that's the snapshot that it got. If you're adding in, all of the other voices and everything, that's when, like you were describing, I had that same issue with Hindenburg's noise reduction. You had to really listen to it carefully, because you would get to a point as you're turning it up. It's like a one knob noise reduction. As you started turning it up more and more, you would start hearing it. It would start like applying a notch filter to different frequencies in people's voices. And all of a sudden it would just sound really bizarre. So you back it off enough to get rid of that notch filter, but then you could still hear the ambient noise of the room underneath it. So I think but it's a different application designed for a different purpose. Hindenburg, they'll tell you right on their website, it's designed for journalists and radio producers and more of an environment where you have a controlled recording space to begin with. It's not really a setup that's designed, I think, for a live production, so to speak. I think it's much better equipped for a narrative documentary style of production.
Totally. All right, so then you got it all in Hindenburg. You're still in Audacity. Sorry, you've been trying Hindenburg lately, but you're still in Audacity.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I like about Hindenburg, and at the end of the day, we'll probably end up switching over, and I'll, find a noise reduction plugin that I can use in Hindenburg instead. But we're still in the research phase.
Cool. So then you mix it down out of Audacity, and so do you create the final MP3 right from Audacity?
Yeah, we just export it directly from Audacity as an MP3. My wife and I, Madam Producer, and I, we use Microsoft OneDrive cloud storage because we can access it from our multiple computers. But I'll export everything directly from Audacity into an MP3 and at either 192 or 256K, depending on if we had any studio tracks that we were playing during the course of the show. If we're going to have studio tracks played back, I'll usually export everything at 256K. If we're just going to have guests, but no music, they didn't bring any studio tracks or any instruments or anything, and it's just us talking, I'll export everything at 192. But we record everything in 24-bit 44.1 wave. Always record in wave. Don't ever record in MP3.
Right. So your final stereo episode is normally 256 kbps.
Again, if we used any studio music tracks from our guests and we had those playing back during the show, then we'll export in 256 because I'll have the guests provide me their studio tracks in wave format as well.
Got it.
Everything's got to be recorded in wave. If you are playing back an MP3 music track and then you export as MP3, you've got a compressed file of an already compressed file, and it sounds terrible.
Right. So if you're not using any music tracks, then you do 192.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, the file size, for an hour show, if we exported at 256K, an hour-long show could be 120, 125 meg.
Yep.
Something like that. At 192, we're looking at, 90 to 100 meg. And yeah, the file sizes can be a little bit big, but a lot of people are downloading shows on Wi-Fi or streaming on Wi-Fi, or even if they're on their cellular plans, just about everybody has an unlimited data plan anymore. It's not quite the obstacle I think that it used to be.
I agree with you.
We
especially
haven't heard any pushback on it at all.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, especially it's a music show, you're playing music. It's like the listeners probably appreciate that it's a higher quality, right?
Well, and 256K, I actually did a lot of just anecdotal research on my own, ripping some of my favorite CDs onto a memory stick and taking them out to the car and going for a drive just to find out how low could I get the rate on it without feeling like the audio quality had suffered terribly.
Right.
And I found for a good studio track, if I ripped my CDs at anything less than 256K, I could start hearing it in the car. And, my anecdotal observation is that a lot of people are listening to podcasts in an already noisy environment anyway. Right. Nobody's sitting at home listening to podcasts on their Macintosh, tube-driven home hi-fi systems. They're usually
Bang and Olufsen
with earbuds on their smartphones.
Totally. All right, so then you upload your MP3, and who do you use for hosting?
SoundCloud is our primary.
Got
We upload to there first, and then we take the RSS feed from SoundCloud and we use that to populate iTunes and Spreaker, and pretty much we're on pretty much every podcast app that's ever been invented and 3 that haven't been invented yet.
Right.
We say that
So
all the time
one thing
on the
about
show.
SoundCloud, you might want to verify. I know at least up until 3 or 4 years ago, SoundCloud, even like you're saying that if you let's say you mix one of your episodes down to an MP3 at 256 kbps, when you upload that to SoundCloud, they again re-encode it to put it up on the SoundCloud. So I remember going back and forth with the SoundCloud people back then, and I said, "Well, can you not reprocess the file?" And they're like, "No, that's just what we do every single upload." So they told me, they're like, "You know what you do? Upload the WAV file to SoundCloud, and then they'll turn it into the MP3 or whatever." So
Really?
yeah.
No, I was not aware of that. I'm going to have to check that out, because we have had a few episodes that I've listened to after the fact, because I do listen to every episode that we put out because I want to see, does it sound okay?
Right.
And we've had a few in our history that when I've listened to them later, I've gone, wow, did we suck that bad? I mean,
Yeah, it's probably SoundCloud. By the way, you can listen to your own show and stand your own voice.
I couldn't at first, buddy. It took me about 30 episodes, and I think what it is that I'm just desensitized now. I think it's
Right.
It's kind of like you get a headache that's so bad that eventually you just forget that you have a headache and you just decide to go on about your day.
Yeah. Totally.
So it's kind of like that.
Very cool.
you can't be a content creator if you're afraid to listen to your own content, because one of the things that I think is really important is, if you don't want to listen to it, why in the world would you expect anyone else to want to listen to it? If you're not interested in what you're doing, no one else is going to be interested in it either. That's part of what I think makes your show right here, the Podcast Engineering Show, such an interesting show, is because you are into it. You are interested in what you're talking about. And that interest and that passion comes through in the conversations that you have with people. So if you're ashamed to listen to what you put out, that should be telling you something.
Yeah, not ashamed. Ashamed is not the right word. Just see, I don't listen.
Ashamed.
No, not embarrassed or ashamed. It's like, here's the thing. When I do my show, like you and I are having this awesome conversation, I heard it. I'm here. I know what it was. I don't need to listen to it again. I know Brad Hargis, he loves to listen to his own show. A lot of people love to listen to their own shows, and that's awesome. But I don't. It's just like it's for me. It's more like a waste of time. Like why am I gonna, unless it's something really interesting that I want to hear again. I already heard it, so it's not. I'm not embarrassed about it. I don't. I do spot check my episodes for quality. Like I will. If, like, for instance, if I mix somebody's voice and I'm like, oh, was there enough low end or too much low end? I will listen to it and hear it on different speakers just to check it. But it's not being ashamed. That's for sure. It's just, I did it. I'm done.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Admit it. You go back and listen to your episode with Brad Hargis from the Cinema Guys. I know you've gone back and listened to that before.
No, a lot of times I listen to about the first 30 seconds, just because on a Thursday morning when it comes out, I'll just check that it came out. I'll just make sure that my own episode hits my own podcast player, and then I'll just hit play, and I'll just hear it just to make sure it starts and it's going, and then that's it. I really don't listen to it. So
yeah, I guess I just have a different approach to it. My whole mindset about it is, if I can go back and listen to the whole thing again and not cringe at the sound of it, okay, that one was good. If I do go back and I go, oh God, that episode was just terrible, that forces me to stop back and think about, okay, what did I do there?
Right.
What do I need to be taken from this? In my mind, you got to be willing to listen to your own material. And yeah, you do got to get desensitized to the sound of your own voice. I don't think my voice is particularly that good sounding on a podcast. Now, in my own head, I sound beautiful. I sound like Barry in my own head. But, on a podcast, I don't think I sound all that great. But
yeah.
It's part of doing business.
Yeah. And I don't, so yeah, it's just two different approaches and they're both good. It's not that I don't think I can improve as a host and I guess if I was to listen to my own show and sit there with a notebook and a pen and write down every little thing I think I did wrong and all that, but I just go, I just do it. I try to do my best and then I just do it. And then it's well, that's it. I did it. And it's like a painting. I just did a painting and it is what it is. And, I am,
maybe,
I do want to improve as a painter. I do want to look at it briefly and say, okay. But I don't want to, so.
Well, maybe part of the reason for the way that I do things the way that I do them is because of that live show format that we're trying to capture. And, I stepped away from broadcasting for 20 years. Just because that's what I studied almost 30 years ago doesn't mean I've been doing it for 30 years. I did it for a while and then I left that industry for a long time and I kind of lost sight of what it was that I loved about it for a long time. And then when this opportunity to create a podcast with Madam Producer came to me, the more we did it, the more it kind of woke something back up in me. And I realized, you know what, man, I really enjoyed doing radio when I was younger. Podcasting gives me a way to kind of recapture that, and I've kind of forgotten how much I love doing it. So part of going back and listening to our episodes is about showing me where my shortcomings are as a host, because the nature of our show doesn't lend itself to a tremendous amount of post-production. Like I said earlier, I got to step up my game. I got to be able to talk and listen to the mix on the fly and ride the faders at the same time and be a live concert engineer, so to speak. If we have people doing stuff in the house with instruments, those are all skill sets that can be learned. And I got a big learning curve ahead of me. So part of it for us is I got to go back and listen to it just to find out what's the next thing that I got to get better at. Right. Because the better job we do capturing this stuff up front, the less we have to worry about fixing stuff on the back end, because this isn't my full-time job. I'm working 60 hours a week and doing other stuff on the side in addition to this. So, part of it is laziness. I just don't want to spend that much time. And part of it is I just only have so many hours in a day. So, it's different horses for different courses.
Yeah. So if you're, I want to hear from you listening to this. What do you listen to your own show? That's my question. So tweet at me or something. So Shawn Kitchen, we're done, man. This was awesome. I want to encourage everyone to go listen to Northwest Corner Podcast, which is your show. And I'll put the link in the description, obviously. And thanks for being such a great guest, man.
It's a mess.
Oh, man. Thanks for having. Oh, sweet, Barry.
I hit the wrong button. I meant to hit this. There we go. So, Shawn, thanks, man. This was a great chat.
Can we grunt again?
Yeah, well, we're going to yell sound great.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Well, can I grunt after that?
You can grunt before and after if you want.
Oh, sweet.
Although afters probably makes more sense. All right. Well, thanks, everybody, for listening to the Podcast Engineering Show. Seriously, if you need any help or if you have any questions about anything, let me know. And here we go. Go, Shawn. Sound great! Dude!
You walk away from me well, and you can't play that part so well. But you're playing out on me now. You like to do should give